I'm a teacher at Appleby. I also run one of our boarding houses. And I also work with our student leaders. We're also hosting in September 2018. So I'll be supporting our coordinator with that conference, which I just found out on Thursday. Yeah, so it's awesome. I'm very excited. It was voluntary. It was one of those things. Yeah. And so we're very excited about that in September. So a little bit of context, Appleby College is a day and boarding school just outside of Toronto in Canada. We have about 750 students from grade 7 to grade 12. And we also have boarding for grade 9 to 12 with about 300 boarders. Something that's sort of unique about our school is that all of our grade 12s have to board in their final year, whether they live across the road from the school or if they're an international boarder. So it's all about university prep, and so it's a unique boarding program because of that, because it's very driven by our grade 12 class. So we were here in January, about 18 months ago, and very excited to learn about the discovery framework, and so we brought it back to Appleby. So what we did was we brought it back, and we had buy-in interest from about 5 areas in our school. So we had curriculum. We had approached our English, grade 12 English program, and there was some interest in seeing if they could pilot something. We also had, that was our senior English. We also had some interest from one of our curriculum directors to see if it could be embedded in other parts of the school. We had residential life, so there was a number of us that were quite interested with our residential life program to see. We were doing a refresh on our program, and so we were interested to see if we could tie this in, because again, it's very much about character, and boarding is a great place to develop that character of our students. As well, student leadership, specifically in our clubs, which I'll speak on a little bit later, because we were doing a club refresh of just kind of looking at how our clubs run. And then also in our grade 8 program, we have these presentations of learning where our grade 8 students have to talk about their experience in the middle school and how it's prepared them to enter high school. And it's sort of their audition for grade 9, you might say, to explain how they've developed as a student and how they're ready to move into high school. And so we actually brought in a component of the framework into those presentations of learning that actually just were taking place this week at our school, because we're just into the exam period at our school and wrapping up the year. So I'm hoping that I might have some video for it, but we had some technical difficulties. I'm waiting to hear back from my school because these were just going on Thursday and Friday back at school. So I'm hoping to have some video of an actual student doing their presentation of learning and talking about the framework, which could be very cool to hear how they relate to it. So these were the 5 areas that showed some interest. So we started then with a general mapping of the framework, which was really led by by Matt Radici, our Round Square coordinator, looking at the framework for what it could develop in our graduates. And we really wanted to do an inventory of what we're really doing already and how we could further develop our students. So like many of our schools, there's already a lot of moving different parts in our program. And so that's one of the things that we've run up against that I'll share with you as well. So as I mentioned, these middle 2, so our school, the middle schools, we have different names for our grades. So middle 2 happens to be grade 8s. They do these presentations of learning. So we examine the framework to see if the discoveries could be a good addition or an alternative for the middle schools to address in their POLs. So in those presentations of learning, they have to justify what they've learned, and so they would use that through the discoveries, is using that language. As I mentioned already, the boarding program, so we wanted to see the attributes that are present within the current curriculum and see if it could be further enhanced by the framework. And as I mentioned already, our Senior 2 English, to see if it could be embedded into the actual curriculum. Of course, we follow the Ontario curriculum, which is very prescribed in Canada. And we also are an AP school, so advanced placement, which we are also working with as well in grade 11 and grade 12. And then, as I mentioned, our leadership and our club program, we wanted to look at the skills that students develop in leadership and see if we could connect that to the framework. We also are still bouncing around ideas about using this with the prefects. I think that the fact that we're hosting in September 2018, it's really going to help us with this language, because we're going to be training a large number of students to actually be the leaders while the conference is taking place. So using the framework in the training of those students, I think will really help it to come to life and for students to actually connect to it. So when we presented it to the faculty in these 5 areas, they were asked to provide feedback on the language, the number of discoveries, were there too many, were there too few, the ease of incorporation, so could it easily fit into what we were already doing, and then discovery skills that could be missing or redundant. These were some of the things we asked them to think about. So we also asked them if they're willing to participate in one of the pilot projects. Do you feel it's realistic in terms of integration? Do you feel it's realistic in terms of time? We wanted to assess how well this already fits in with what we're doing, because we didn't want to reinvent things that we were doing and maybe lose the baby in the bathwater sort of thing, and then outline the challenges. So these were the questions that were posed to the people who agreed to come on board. So what it looked like then this is sort of just a little plotting of the timeline. So we came back in February of 2016. We gave feedback. We got some feedback from the faculty. March to June, we started incorporating into the pilot project. So those 5 areas that I talked about, people started to sort of brainstorm and think how it could fit. By last year at this time, we were doing a little bit of a debrief on those initial steps and what the next steps were going forward. And then this year, we really dug into trying to embed it into those areas. So what it looked like this year, we had full integration in our Res Life curriculum. So I think it helped that both Matt and myself are members of our residential life team. So in some of our off-site work that we did, redeveloping the Res Life curriculum, we worked hard to try to integrate it into the discoveries into the curriculum. We had the discovery framework. So another role that, as I've mentioned, that I do at my school is I work with student leadership. And because of that, I work with our program directors, athletics, service, arts, and leadership. And so we all were working together on this club review. And so the discovery came up in that review as far as could we put this into our clubs and really run with it. In June, as I mentioned, we just had the first presentation of learning, presentations that were integrating the discoveries. And then we can see that in 3 key areas, there was a commitment in the school. So unfortunately, curriculum and our English, senior English program, they weren't able to sort of take it and run with it. I think it fizzled out with them. So really we saw that of the 5 areas that made that initial commitment, 3 of them have been actually successful in trying to do it. And so I think we could probably do some more debriefing around why that was. I think logistically, I could probably speak to it that our curriculum is very rich and quite prescribed, and so difficult to add that other layer. And especially again with the English, the senior English, I think again they're probably driving so much in the curriculum that they just didn't see it as something they could easily do at this time. But I do think with 3 out of the 5 areas having made a bit of a commitment that it will start to infiltrate and embed into the language of the school is our hopes. So we use, this is just a little bit about the logistics of how we went about doing it. We have a really cool system at our school with OneNote. I'm not sure how many of your schools are using OneNote now, but we have been using OneNote for a number of years at our school as shared as learning spaces. And we use them now in all areas of the school, not just in academic classes. We use them for any faculty committee or any club. Everybody has a OneNote that is a shared document. So that was where a lot of our collaboration was going on. And again, just sort of, this was the logistics of what it looked like. We had small groups of faculty who were committed to trying it out. And we also had some student involvement. So Matt actually is the Round Square Student Council faculty advisor. So he was able to get some student involvement and student feedback, which again, as I said, I think will be improved as we go along with the upcoming conference. So what I'm going to show you now is, so that was just a little bit of the background of what it looked like when we left here in January of 18 months ago, 2016, what it looked like when we went back to the school. Now I'm going to share with you the two examples of how really it's gone quite well. And then in one area that we have had some challenges of the three that actually took off and people that ran with it. So the first one was our residential life program. So this was it was our existing residential life curriculum. It looked like this, and it had different areas that had been identified as far as important parts that we should be ensuring that our students in their boarding experience would be able to have experience with. And so this was what already existed. So when I talk about the fact that we already had a lot of moving parts and there wasn't a real desire to throw all of these things that already existed out. So what we did do a lot of was sort of seeing how we could make connections that we could then build on. So if you look at the discovery framework, compare it to what we already had, then we had some mapping that took place. So trying to line up what we were already doing with the framework to start to see if we could build on it. So I'm sure any of your schools who are thinking about, who are working with the framework, this might be one approach that you take. If you have an existing program that is doing quite well, how do you revamp it to really fit in with the framework? So with our ResLife program, we have a life skills passport that's part of the program. So we have different speakers and workshops that we offer to our students while they're in boarding to help them develop life skills. Cooking clubs, we're hoping to, so we had teachers this year offering workshops on how to do your taxes, how to live with a roommate, and so those are usually on weekends. They're usually on weekends. Our teachers do duty on the weekends, and so on those weekends when they were on duty, this was something they could naturally run for an hour or two, were these little workshops that address different life skills. So that was something that we already had in the works. So we wanted to see if we could kind of connect it to the framework and have it come to life that way. So, for example, one of the workshops be responsible use of social media. So we felt that could fit in then in that area. So you can just see how it's sort of been mapped. Managing a bank account, basic outdoor skills. So that is our residential life curriculum. So it's still in the works. We're still developing how we address those different areas with different activities, different speakers, or the workshops that we offer, or just the general curriculum of weekly meetings in the house, etc. So the second example that I wanted to share with you is this presentation of learning done by our grade 8 students at the end of their middle school experience. So for the middle 2 students, they occur every year in June. Instead of exams, so our grade 8s don't actually have exams, they have these presentations of learning, which is more of an experiential demonstration of how they've grown as a student and what they've learned. So they make this presentation to highlight what they've done throughout the year to allow them to be prepared to move on to the 9th grade. We have, of course, like many of our schools, we have our pillars of strength, our 6 pillars of strength at Appleby. So the students were already doing this in their presentation of learning, where they had to choose 3 of the pillars and they had to speak to an experience that they've had during their middle school that demonstrate that they've learned this, that they've developed along the pillar of strength. So these are the 6 pillars of strength. So then we had them also, so the structure really would be essentially the same, but what we did was they had them choose, in addition to the 3 pillars of Appleby, we had them choose one of the round square discoveries to support each of those pillars, to speak about it, and then 2 round square discoveries to support why they should be promoted to upper 1 or to grade 9. So the students will, so this was taken from their assignment or their the communication about the presentation of learning. They will focus on 2 of the discoveries that are most important to you and explain why these are essential for you to be ready for upper school and in general preparation for life ahead. So this was an easy way to trial it with our middle school and start the conversation about the framework and the language and get them familiar with it. Okay, so third of all was this club review. So at Appleby, our students are expected every term to be involved in a co-curricular, and they have a choice of an athletic co-curricular, an art, or a service. And that changes every reporting period. We have 3 reporting periods in the year. At the same time, our students have to be involved in at least 1 club for the entire year, and they meet weekly for 1 hour a week. And that's a club commitment that they all have to make, and they have that throughout the entire year. So this past October, we started to look at our club reviews. So initially, our clubs were packaged into 2 buckets that were art and service. When the club system had initially been created, it was really to ensure that our students, who quite often were having an athletic experience in their co-curriculars, would have a very rich service or arts experience as well. We now find, because we have such a well-developed service, art, and athletic co-curricular options, that our students don't need to just bump up their art and service experience, because not all of our students are doing a sport every reporting period. They might be doing the school play. So we really felt that that system was sort of no longer worked for, it was too narrow for the program. So we did a lot of, the team of program directors did a lot of discussions about what it would look like, how we could recreate the system. And one of the things that we talked about was the desire to try to bring the framework into it. So this is one of the experiences I sort of wanted to share, is that what we encountered is that unless there is a commitment at all levels of the school, you might run into some people who don't see the value. So the assistant head connected to the club review is not directly involved in Round Square or any of the activities. So there was a resistance to make sure that Round Square, that we weren't, our Appleby program wasn't being driven by something external. So it's one of those things that you may have to think about as you're going through it, and how you ensure that all faculty and all students who may not have had an experience with Round Square up to this point can see the value and recognize that our schools will have huge value if we start to see this language throughout the school, so that for that very reason, those students who might not experience a conference or an exchange still understand that they're at a Round Square school and there's huge value to the program. So that's just being very candid, is that it was a bit challenging to see. The hope was that we could really embed this very obviously into the club review, but it didn't completely happen. So what we did end up doing was we threw out the arts and service categories, and we broke all of our clubs. So these, I know it's very small, so I'm sorry, but these are all the clubs that are offered at our school. And so we broke them up into leadership, global citizenship, beyond the classroom, and which is sort of like an academic enrichment. So people who are really passionate about biomedical studies, there's a biomedical club. So community advocacy, well-being, and arts and design, which there are some good connections to the different ideals. And I think especially kind of hearing the language today with that, it's about the spirit of them, that I think that is something that we can really take back. Because our next step in the club review is, so now that we have these sort of 6 different buckets that are all of our categories that all of our clubs are fitting into, we're actually developing a club curriculum. So one of the things is that all of our faculty have to run a club. And what we find is that without having the same sort of expectations that a course would have, without having a designed curriculum, sometimes those clubs just end up being a 1 hour, hang out in a room and do something related to your club. And we really want to make them a much deeper experience. So we're developing a curriculum for our clubs so that our faculty actually have to be accountable to different learning outcomes. And so we're currently writing those learning outcomes. And again, the language of the framework is going to be really helpful. So I'm excited to take this back because we're actually going to be doing this work over the summer and in the fall. And so I'm kind of excited to share it this way that people could see that if they are in an art and design club and they need to hit the experiential learning outcome, that there could be language that works as far as the expectations that they're going to do during their club. So so this little chart just sort of shows that for an art and design category club, they need to hit on experiential knowledge and skills. And then there'll be specific outcomes within those that will be written by the faculty, by the students, as far as sort of setting a goal for the year as to what they want to achieve and how they want to use this experience to enrich their experience at Appleby. So again, this was just a little, Matt actually did this up for us, just a little bit of mapping to show connections between those values that we'll be designing the curriculum around, and that there is really great connection. So again, what we really learned from this, I think I touched on this already, is that there is a real strong desire to use language that already exists in our school and in our school culture. So in this case, we weren't completely able to use the framework, but I really do see us using the framework more for those specific expectations as we move on in the club review. So this is our final thoughts, out of order, sorry about that. So it has been a steady process since we were here in January, and we really hope that it will continue. And as I've already mentioned, I think it's really going to help that we have a big commitment by the school hosting the conference, and that's going to really help to drive the importance of us showing that we're a round square school and that we're hosting people from around the world, and we all have this common thing between our schools. The key to the success has really been multiple faculty members who are overseeing different areas of implementation and their knowledge of Round Square. So what we're really learning from this is that if our faculty have some sort of an experience that makes it, that they have a connection, it's going to be easier for the uptake. So that's something for the school to be really intentional about as well when they're thinking about staffing of conferences or supporting of exchange experiences. And again, as we will need more faculty involvement leading up to the conference, I think that this will help with the energy and the commitment. The ease of the implementation is really largely thanks to the Discovery Framework lining up very closely to our mission and values. So the fact that Appleby is an independent school that really has been committed to Round Square, and we share those values, that it is helpful that a lot of what we already do does line up to that really strong student experience. And then the flexibility and the breadth of the Discovery Framework has really allowed us to implement it where we see that it fits and where it works. So what we're really seeing is that in our curriculum, in our academic classes, it's a harder fit right now just because of the fact that we have a curriculum driven by the province and also our AP courses. But our co-curricular program is very, very rich. And there's a lot more that we can make the connections to the discovery in that area because it's all about that character education piece, the student experience, and what they're taking away from those experiences as they head on to university and life after that. So, I'm sorry, I hope I didn't speak too quickly. I hope that it was quite straightforward. Would anybody at this point have any questions about the experience? Because we by no means were experts, we were just trialing this out and seeing how it went. Yeah? No?
Possibly just clarify, you talked about grade 8.
Grade 8.
Yeah, what sort of age?
Oh yeah, grade 8. So grade 8 is 13, 12, 13. Grade 9 is 13, 14, 14, 15. They turn 15 in grade 9. Yeah, yes.
How long do their presentations have?
Pardon me?
How long do their presentations have?
Oh yeah, thank you. They are about, so I've sat on the panel. They're really awesome little presentations. And they're very, very official. So the student has a panel of 3 teachers who sit there. Their parents are invited to attend if they'd like. And it tends to be about a half hour, 20, yeah, about 20 minutes. Yeah, about 15, maybe like 15 to 20 minutes, maybe not a half hour. They have a question and answer portion at the end. But it's a pretty rich experience for them as grade 8s to have to come in and they create a presentation. So maybe 20 minutes. Well, yeah, they're pretty amazing little presentations that they go through. Yes, I'm sorry.
How are you developing the mechanism for assessing learning outcome in club activities?
So, sorry, would you ask me that again?
How are you assessing the learning outcomes?
Oh,
for
how,
teachers?
like how are we helping the
Club-
teachers in the clubs?
club-
Yeah, so we this winter presented to the faculty the revamp of the clubs and that they will be having to either design as a club their expectation. And we're not looking at, they're not going to have 30 different expectations for their club. We're hoping maybe 2 in each of those 3 areas, 2 or 3. Really, it's a hope that it's some goal setting that they will have, that by the end of the club experience of the year, that they hope to have achieved this and this, or have had an experience. So the teachers really, all they will be asked to do is go online and put in which expectations they're choosing for the year to see come alive. So we'll be providing to them the expectations. They have the freedom to write expectations as well if they feel that the club wants to it. And there really isn't going to be, so we want it to be, to have more meat to it, but we don't want it to be that these teachers are now dreading going to their club because they have to write. But we do, of course, like many of your schools, I'm sure, they do have a report card comment for their club every reporting period. So we want them to have language to be able to speak about the experience and to speak more specifically about their individual student and what they've achieved during their club that year. So it's just another layer to ensure that there is accountability and good quality programming going on in that program area. But they'll really be given, we're still developing the expectations. That's on the list of things to do in the next sort of month. And then in September, they'll be given those to choose and just identify that they're doing. Yeah, I hope that helps. Yes?
2 questions. If you found any staff, who were resistant in the beginning, did any of them kind of change their mind during the process? Did they buy into it a little more?
Yeah, I think so. I think so at the same time, so our Appleby's, like many of our schools, we're all about trying to do better and change, and we're very comfortable with change in our school, almost too comfortable that there's, we have to be careful that it's not a rotating door of a new initiative every year. One of the things that we struggled with was that last year at this time, a new position was created around social emotional learning that the school had identified in a health and wellness review that we needed to have a social emotional curriculum. And so it's unfortunate that it sort of came at the same time, because really to me, this is very much about social emotional. It really is very much about that student experience and character development. And so we had a woman who had assumed this role of the coordinator for social emotional, who at the same time was trying to implement into programs. So that's been sort of a challenge, because Matt and myself and the global ed have really had to advocate to say, like, we have a commitment to being a Round Square school, and this language needs to be reflected somewhere. So it definitely is not complete harmony as of yet, because we do have a little bit of competing intentions at this time.
And then the other thing was not a question, is that one of the challenges that we have with schools is when you go and propose something, the teachers say, this is yet another new thing
Yes.
you do, and you haven't taken anything away, and it's just,
Yeah.
and which is why I liked your mapping, because what you did is you took your existing values,
Yes.
and then you try to see where they align, and I'm just thinking about ours, it would be really easy for us to actually do that, and then just be a little bit more intentional in bringing the language in, and just maybe
Yeah.
shifting the language. And
Yeah.
I think that's what the staff don't want, a new
No.
thing that they've got, but if it's there already, and it's just underpinning, I think it's much easier to sell it to them.
Yeah, and I know that's sort of how I've made peace with it in my mind, with not wanting to be too much of a strong advocate to say, hey, like, we got to get back to this, is that trying to say we're already doing wonderful things, and we already know that we have a program that is rich, and but we can start to shift language and get people more comfortable. I was even just saying to Rachel that the visuals, like these visuals here, I think could be incredibly powerful as we bring them back to school, and that people can start to see, that there's so many connections to what we're already doing. So I think it's just a slow sort of shift in some of our big schools that already are moving in a direction. Any other? Yeah, sorry.
Have you actually developed any more structures to help pupils leading up to their presentation, so in the other year groups, to sort of understand more of the journey they're on, to reflect upon what they're learning from that?
Yeah, so the presentational learning, so that's a great question. The sevens, so our middle school currently are the only ones doing the presentations of learning in grade 8. There is a strong desire in the school, though, to move towards a grade 12 presentation of learning, and it's slowly being and I think that when we initially looked at the senior English program, trying to be involved in the pilot project, I think we were hoping that the presentation of learning at grade 12 would be further along. So in our high school, they don't currently do that. So they sit exams at the end of the year, and that's the end of their experience. But we really would like to, I think the school has intention of hoping to get there to that presentation of learning, so that they can speak about all the experiences, their academic, their co-curricular, while at the school. Okay, I think that's it. Thanks.